Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet. This review covers the Kustom Koffin. It's a 124 scale Lindberg kit number 6031, recently re-released, and it consists of 55 parts molded in black. The instructions are pretty simple, one-page affair, and they're okay for this build as it's pretty simple build itself. The decals are nice and they release from the backing easily, although some kind of disappear on the black. So if you use the box art, expect that to happen. Here are the contents of this kit, and some people would call this an open box review. Well, you can see all the parts in about 10 seconds, so I opened the box and there they are. I won't try to pick up each part and describe it, because that won't help you build the kit, will it? So, watch along as we use some Model Masters liquid cement, sometimes super glue for strength, to build this kit. Also, here are the decals for this kit. As you can see, they're colorful and the registry is pretty good. They come off easily and they'll stick pretty well. So, there probably won't need to use any of the aftermarket setting solutions. But remember, follow all of the manufacturer's safety and use guidelines when you use any of the products that you see here in the review. Grab these parts, as this build will start with the tire and wheel assemblies. The picture shows the 16 parts that you'll use. Each tire is in 2 halves, so once you glue them together and they're dried, I recommend sanding the joint, which will also give the tire a used look. And then the outer rims were painted silver, and the sides of the backing plates facing out from the car were painted an orange. I painted the inside back of the backing plates black. And most of the paint that I use here just used with I just used a rattle can for these parts because there's not a lot of detail that you need to worry about covering up. Now the front tires were, halves were and rims were cleaned up and they're ready to paint, as you see here in the photo. So go ahead and paint those parts as we've described. As you can see here, they'll actually add a little definition and highlight to the car with basic black there. The tires and wheels are made of plastic, not rubber, but they make a pretty good looking representation once they're assembled. Here they're put together, of course, and I've partially sanded the track surface area and the tires here just to give it a little scuffed up look, like it's been on the track. The engine is a simplified construction, and of course these were meant for kids back in the 50s and 60s, so you'll have to understand that as we go through, but it still looks pretty nice once it's together. Go ahead and assemble the block and transmission halves there, and then the intake manifold is added, and finally the fan belt and assembly there goes on the front of the engine. The details lacking, but once again, this is a pretty simplified kit. Still looks good when it's overall done. Now the black styrene is hard to get any details to stand out in the pictures here, but there aren't a lot anyway, so you'll get the idea. Now with the block assembled, go ahead and grab the rest of the parts, the header pipes and the valve covers, and we'll paint those next. So we'll paint the carbs, the headers, the valve covers in a silver color to emulate a steel or aluminum, and that includes the transmission on the engine itself. Now the features that are on the engine, they can be painted to add some detail there. The motor mounts and the starter, and a few of the other molded parts. And once again, the transmission is done in silver. Now here's the other side of the engine block so that you can see what those parts would look like if you want to go ahead and detail those. Once the parts are dried, you can glue the headers and the valve covers, the carburetors and the gear shifter into place. And that has a black shift knob on it. Now after the glue had set, I did a little kind of emphasis painting here with some black wash, and that's basically 50-50 paint and thinner mix, no matter what type of paint it is. And also I added some heat stains with some clear blue paint and some gold there on the headers, and gold on the air filter casings to give it a little bit of highlighting. We'll use these parts for step 3 in the instructions, and that's the drivetrain. And the rear end consists of 4 parts with the drive shaft, the rear end itself, which is two halves, which are assembled, shown here, and then the rear gear cover plate. So I believe this is supposed to be like one of the quick change plates that they use in the racing industry. So I painted the quick change plate silver, and I also didn't glue the drive shaft into place yet because I wanted to make sure that it lines up with the transmission later. Now we can get out the rest of the parts that will be used to build the chassis up. And the rear end, of course, is completed, the engine is completed, and then they're shown here in the picture. And I painted the front and rear leaf spring suspensions parts silver, and the radius arms are the orange that I used on the rims to give it some emphasis. The frame, of course, is black. So once you have the chassis painted and dried, you can actually assemble all these pieces. And at this point, I put the rear radius arms and the engine into place. So just locate the mounting tabs there. Make sure that you scrape off any glue that's there to get a good adhesion for that bond. So here's what the front end of that chassis will look like with the engine in place and the drop axle leaf spring there. So go ahead and get this ready for the next step. Well, the seat is pretty simple. It's just a one-piece molding, and I painted up you know, kind of leather color with some silver sides there, like they're aluminum. And even with the orange parts, the car still overall is just black, and it's hard to see any details. So I added some to the interior with this colors on this seat. Once the seat has dried thoroughly, go ahead and glue that into position on the chassis plate. So get these parts out now, and the body consists of the main body shell, the roof, and the dash and roll bar, and the gauges are molded into the dash, and the only other interior part being the steering wheel. So paint the dash silver and the gauges in black. So assemble the top there to the body, and I painted the interior a silver color and the body was black, and went with that gloss black a little further away to give it an older look, as if it was a weathered, beat up old body. Now returning to the chassis, I slid the rear axle into the axle housing, and then the larger tires and axle caps went on, and then the front tires were done the same way. The body's really coming together now. With the chassis done, we'll be able to start a final assembly here. As you can see, it's looking pretty good even for just a basic black vehicle. If you add a little emphasis, you can actually make this car stand out on the shelf and be something that is easily recognizable. Now the final parts were added to the body, you know, and the hood. And the hood fit could have been a little better. There's a slight gap between it and the firewall. But I think if you take a little time, you might be able to massage that so that you get a little bit better fit than I did here. So keep an eye out for that when you're putting this model together. Now use some plenty of warm water to remove the decals from their backings and add those to the body, and they go on pretty nicely. There's no real super contours here to contend with. And if you had some extra sponsor decals from another kit or something, they'd go nice on this vehicle as well. You could add some more detailing to this model. You could put some wires on the engine if you like, but just by itself, it's a simple build, you know, something you can do in a weekend, and add some color to it and make for a nice looking display. If you like these old racing cars models, or if you were into the racing you know, genre there with the circle dirt tracks, this will make a nice display. So if you'd prefer one of these simplistic weekend builders, go out and put one on your shelf. And just for effect, I added a figure here from another kit that is the crew chief, and he's standing by waiting for the race to start. Well, we hope you liked this premium model kit review, and so that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. But you can find us on Facebook, and as always, at our website, www.rightonreplicas.com. Thanks.